This is What's Actually Happening, the APHS Frame and Field podcast. I'm Jim Zaborn, and each week we look at how human systems actually organize themselves through meaning, through frames, through the interpretation that's already running before effort begins. And thank you for joining us today. And joining us also is Chantelle Neufeld. And Chantelle is a first-time reader of paper 20102, so book 1, paper 2. What APHS is not and why that matters. And it does matter. And we'll find out if it mattered to Chantelle. Chantelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And you were on the show previously. You were interacting with paper 1 of book 1. And so we really enjoyed that conversation. And so we're looking forward to today's conversation.
Yes, I certainly am. This is a fascinating topic for me.
Very good. Chantelle, you approached this book. I know I sent it this paper, so it's a little mini book, really, a paper, a monograph. You approached it. I believe you received it yesterday, so you've had about 24 hours, and so this was your first reading of it, was it not?
Yes, it was.
Very good. So, what was your initial impression? Which is overall, what's the big impression that comes to top of mind?
Hmm. I guess what resonated most with me was just the whole idea of defining something by what it is not, but also like the energy of reducing pressure. Like that stood out to me over the whole thing. And also like reconsidering our relationship to control.
Yes.
That
Yes,
stood out a lot.
it probably was triggered by the word autonomy because that appears a few times in there. So yeah,
Yes,
good,
yes.
nice, yes, and APHS as a field refuses to take control, and that's by design. So good, those are really good intuitions there. What do you think those resonated the most with you?
Well, just I guess, well, and that's another thing that came up as I was reading it. It was talking about worldview. And so I've always considered my worldview to be very like open-minded and, open to interpretation. And, but you also mentioned about the worldviews can create dependency instead of flexibility. So I thought that was a fascinating idea
Yes,
too.
yes. There are frames within frames within frames, and worldview
Yeah.
is a frame, but there are deeper frames, and there's nothing wrong with a worldview. We have to operate with them. We have to operate with every frame. We have them there to operate with, and so they make sense. But what really helps is when we can evaluate them and examine them, and being open-minded is a great worldview. It creates a worldview from collapsing into something too narrow to really be able to navigate life with very effectively. So, excellent. So really, it doesn't change your worldview, and it doesn't change the need or the importance of the worldview that you have and you've developed and is obviously very important to you. So it's kind of nice, and maybe there's some freedom in that too, isn't there?
Yes, freedom and flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my observation of life, freedom and flexibility is where things will naturally kind of go to after all the chaos and all the complication proves not worthy.
Hmm.
So it seems like things want to go simpler. They're very complex, but it seems like there's a natural tendency towards simplicity sometimes.
Yeah. Like I was toying with the idea of it being like a neutral concept, but also like you were talking in the paper about passive withdrawal versus an allowing presence without interference.
Yes, and there's a big difference there. That's a good thing to pick up on, because there are a lot of worldviews or philosophies and frames where it's like, well, I just need to be passive about this, and I just need to just accept everything. Kind of. They don't really usually say that, but really, in order to make sense of it, they almost have to operate that way, and which of course is very difficult to do for a functioning adult. Any human being really, let alone a
Yeah.
functioning adult. We have to make judgments. We don't have to be judgmental, where we don't have to assign meanings to things, but we have to use good judgment to say, well, this is good for me, or this is not good, this is bad for me. And so we do have to have ideas, and we really can't be completely passive about life. unless we just want to float through life and allow whatever happens to happen to us. And really, that's not the way humans are, as a system, are designed to be. We can train ourselves to be that way, but it's an unhappy way of being, in my opinion. And maybe some other people have that experience and it's great for them. And so, more power to them. But I can't really, at the moment see that myself. But what I would prescribe more is an awareness of what's there and an acceptance of it being there without having to adopt it myself. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yes. What's coming up in my mind right now is a picture on the projector in my NLP training of the filters of the mind, how
Yes.
information comes in and gets distorted and generalized, and I forget the other
Yes.
word.
Yes, exactly. And some we might look at that from the outside and think, okay, well, it's distorted, that's bad, or it's generalized, that's really, that's not good. Through the filters, those three filters. But
Oh, it was delete, distort,
delete,
delete, or
exactly.
generalize. Yeah.
Yeah, it's deleted. That's bad. I don't have all the information. Well, the fact is we couldn't operate. We have so many sensors and so much information and data coming in that our mind has to give a shorthand so that our conscious mind can make decisions of what's most what it thinks is most needed to be optimized or most needs to be looked at or dealt with immediately. And so it will give the information in shorthand for our conscious mind to make a decision. And so it's a very important function. But you see, our other than conscious mind holds all of that information, but it's having to give a little frame of information, and the information it's going to choose is a lot of it's based on our frames. So we do our frames are going to interpret what the shorthand message is going to be very often at a certain level. So, the frames are very important, but the seeing through frames and operating through frames is how we do it. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing because it allows us to handle a lot of data coming in, which are other than conscious mind can handle, but we are able to co-create with it because our mind can function with some little piece of that at
Yeah.
any given time, and that's the shorthand. And the projector is exactly right, and we're projecting on there, and worldviews. We all have a worldview. We can turn that into more of a conscious thing where we decide our worldview, but there's going to be a deeper, quote unquote, worldview that we are not aware of, at a conscious level, and those are the ones that are really going to catch us.
Yeah. You talked a lot in your papers. The word coherence stood out to me because that's obviously a word I've heard before, but not one that I've necessarily defined for myself or studied at length. Um, but I feel like it kind of has the energy of harmony
Yes.
between the unconscious and the conscious.
Entirely, entirely. Later papers, in fact, paper Ford is, I believe, in the first book, deals with theory of mind, and that is coherence is extremely important. I think, to this
Like the
field.
ultimate goal of the
Well,
field.
let's see, could I say it's an ultimate goal? I would say it's my ultimate goal to have coherence between my conscious mind and my other than conscious mind, because then we are, me, but it's all the same mind. It's just different. It's different. They're just different capacities all operating at the same time. And there's those different, I hesitate to say layers, but there's just the operation of the mind is complex, so complex that we have to in a conscious sense have to categorize it into these different areas when it's really not different areas. I don't believe it's really all happening at the same time. It's just that they're doing different things. That's how amazing the mind is, and we can, typically our experience, moment by moment when we're waking is we're really engaging at a conscious level, but really, we shift in and out to a subconscious level. We're always in an unconscious level, what the body knows, because we're always, our body is always interpreting data coming in,
Like
and
the
we give.
body is the subconscious
Yeah,
mind,
it is.
science is
It's
discovering.
yeah, absolutely, and it could be seen that way. way. And so, in fact, I kind of do see it that way. If I wanted
Hmm.
to, localize it, I might see it more in the solar plexus than I see it in the brain. I don't know. That's just kind of my picture of it. But the
Hmm.
fact is, what I'm really talking about is I'm observing these things happening, and so they are happening. Exactly how, I don't know, and I know a lot of science behind it. So there's a lot of good ideas, but the real point is, there's something going on and it's happening at a lot of different levels, and all those levels are happening at the same time. And we can shift to conscious, to subconscious. Hypnosis is a great way to shift, to the subconscious mind, although we're all shifting back and forth all the time anyway, just naturally.
Anytime we're imagining anything.
Yeah, exactly. Or engaging with anything that it requires, picturing something in our mind
Mhm.
and like listening to a story, all kinds of things. So the mind is very powerful. But where things get tripped up is when there's a lack of coherence,
Yeah.
in these different areas. And so, it's so for me, it's, I'm listening to my body. So I'm listening to what I would call the unconscious, and I'm listening to my subconscious mind, which via what I would consider to be intuition. And I'm listening to my cognitive mind, my logical mind, so my conscious mind. I'm listening to all those, and I want them lined up. And so it's one mind, and I'm operating as one human being. And but that human being, that human system is very complex, and even the I that is thinking is made up of many layers of I's that developed over time, which is by design. So it's a
Mhm.
good thing, in other words, in my opinion. And so I want to be coherent with my design. I want to be able to operate like my design, and within the design, I have many layers of mind and many layers of I. My identity, the ego, and so the thing that holds things together in a coherent picture, so I can operate in daily life, and I can operate with other humans, and they can understand who I am because there's a coherence of my ego, the I. But none of that is in a material sense. It's not fixed, but thankfully it's consistent. Okay, thankfully it's persistent. And so we can use that as a tool to move forward, and we can grow. But we're not locked in to anything we don't want, really. Some things we can move to another position faster than others. Some things are much more persistent, and it might take a little more time, but we can direct these things when there's coherence. Usually what's happening is there's not coherence between the mind and the rest of the mind, the other than conscious mind. I should say it's kind of gets confusing, but the conscious mind, there's not coherence with the conscious mind and the rest of the mind, the other than conscious mind. And that creates all kinds of self-sabotage and lack of motivation and everything else. And so when there's not coherence, it's like sand in the engine. Okay.
Yeah,
It
that's a good
doesn't work good.
metaphor. Yeah, so what it brings to mind for me is when I was the client instead of the therapist, and I was asked questions, and so for example, I said yes when my body was actually saying no. And like there was a bit of muscle testing in this one session we did where, like my mind logically would give an answer, but my body would lean in a different direction, or it would feel, contracted versus expansive, where my body was, saying where there was incoherence. It was showing where there was incoherence. And just how much
Absolutely.
easier it is when there is coherence for that to be reflected in the outward reality versus trying to force a specific change that isn't working like that. There's some resistance, subconscious resistance too.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it does reflect in our reality. What we're, if nothing else, the way we're seeing our reality, we're interpreting it that way because of those deeper things. But certainly I believe their experience of life is that the moment that we're living in right now is super responsive. And so in my opinion, this goes more to an application. I have timeline surfing, and how to work with that. So that's more applicational, but it's based on the APHS field. but it's so responsive that you're very right. In my picture, a manifestation law of attraction, people would see it a little bit differently, perhaps. But it's that idea there is when we are incoherent, that signal that's going out, is read very strongly, and then whatever we think is going to be the response to a strongly read signal, that's probably what's going to happen.
Because there's no resistance pulling it back from
Yes, exactly,
manifesting. Yeah.
exactly. And so, that kind of points out that maybe we shouldn't get it. If we're feeling resistance, there's something about us that says it's not right. It's not right for me now. It's bad. It's going to kill me. It's something
Or that whole
within,
secondary gain, you
or
know,
there's a secondary gain that has a higher priority, and we rather have, attention for not getting something.
but it's unconscious. We
It's
don't,
it
we're not aware
exactly,
that it's
exactly.
operating behind the scenes. Yeah.
And that's okay. That's not broken. That's the way it's supposed to be. And if we're not getting what we want, or we're not going in the direction in life that we want, we don't have to fix, in my opinion, we don't have to fix a subconscious that's working in the wrong direction or anything else. It's all working in the right direction. We made it that way, but we have to then go in there and we have to bring coherence. We have to bring them in line. What the body knows is oftentimes wrong, dead wrong, and what the subconscious thinks is often wrong, dead wrong.
Yeah.
To what the logic mind can think of, and what the logic mind thinks of is often dead wrong to whatever other parts can think of.
Yeah.
But what we need to do is not bring one in line with the other in the sense that one knows more. What we need to do is we need to bring them all together into coherence. And that means that sometimes one is going to be less right, but it's not less right in an ultimate sense of right or wrong. It's less right for what I want to do, right?
Hmm.
But it's right for what it was supposed to do at some time. It's just not the
Yeah.
right time anymore, often.
And how, like, I'm just thinking now how everyone's interpreting the world differently and everyone has different perceptions. And so, in the
Yes.
helping field, when a coach, counselor, therapist imposes their solution on the client,
Yes.
it's almost always incoherent because it's not taking
Yes.
into account all of the subconscious things that are at
Yes.
play for the client.
Absolutely. That is such an important insight there, Chantel. Uh, and that's a common mistake, but it's as a person gets more experience, it becomes less of a mistake. But really, when I went to a certified college of hypnotherapy, and I learned some really great techniques from really great teachers. But it was all the technical stuff was fine. It was really good, but I wasn't really good at it until I started realizing that I didn't have the answers for people, that they had the best answer themselves. And all I had to
Yes.
do was get out of the way, and I didn't have to figure out their problems. I just had to create an environment where they could see what they needed to see to fix their own problem. And
Yeah,
that
and
was a
like
really
holding that space and
a
having that
holding space. Yes.
non-judgmental compassion and yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it didn't, so when we're really good at what we do, helping people, we're not solving their problems. We're giving them some space to see a solution. In my perspective, and probably yours too, I'm not saying it's not, but in my perspective, a lot of that is helping them get perspective, helping them get
Hmm.
oriented, where they're at, where they want to go, and then allowing their own other than conscious mind or their conscious mind to work together to get that coherent answer to what they're looking for.
Hmm. I find often that when a person tries to figure out their issues on their own, there tends to be a lot of distractions or like parts of them that are trying to help them by not feeling and distracting. And then in the context when there is a helper involved, it kind of like keeps that focus directed on what the outcome they want or the feeling that they
Yes,
want to have. Um, yeah, so I do feel like it's very helpful,
it is.
but not if there's any kind of like coercion involved
Right,
on
right,
behalf of the therapist.
right. And
Yeah.
and that really brings it around to what you were saying originally, that a lot of times people are introducing a worldview or something that's irrelevant to the person. It may be very true. It might be more true than what the person thinks. Who knows? But the fact is, it's irrelevant to what that person can do because they don't see it that way. And we do all see life different. It's designed that way. It's made that way. It has to be that way because we all have different experiences, and our beliefs are coming from our experiences. And so, and our experiences are shaped by our beliefs about them. And so we have interpretations of those things. So we are all very different, and that's a good thing. Because we can now start learning other perspectives. We don't have to experience everything, and we can then create even more in life because we can now start learning from other people and their experiences. That is a problem. I've sat through hundreds of hours of practice sessions towards graduating, and also just helping other people graduate. And I can't tell you how many times people implanted in my subconscious all kinds of belief systems that have nothing to do with with
Yeah.
my outlook on life, and that's okay because my subconscious, I say that tongue in cheek,
You're
they
able to take
implanted.
the meat and leave the bones.
Yeah, exactly. Because my subconscious is able easily to filter. It has to filter advertising and everything else,
Right?
every
Yeah.
other fool idea I hear every day. So certainly
Yeah.
it can accommodate somebody who's learning, and but it is striking to me how it really is not a helpful thing, I don't think. It can be helpful if somebody's from the same worldview. I work with people who come from more of a same worldview as I do. Often enough, I don't specialize in that area, but often enough, and I know their worldview, and so I can use metaphors and I can use ideas that I know that they're familiar with. But mostly I work with people who are not of that worldview, and none of my worldview comes into their worldview because I'm aware that I'm really holding space for the person. And that's really what APHS is about. It's the orientation, so a person can get some, I often call it mobility. They can navigate or they can move. A lot of times they're so really where they come to me, or a lot of people are for help, is they're constrained. They can't see anything else. And really it's basically just holding space for them where they can see for themselves their different options. And there's a lot of different methods to do that. Those are all applications. But the idea is it's not a good idea to impose our viewpoints on other people. It doesn't help. In fact, it is irrelevant at
Yeah,
best.
exactly. It reminds me, I really enjoy Esther Perel's podcast because she incorporates many different cultures. She speaks very many different languages, and she sees how different cultures have different belief systems. And she, has such an open-minded perspective to work within their frames. And
Yes.
also, it's just really interesting how she repeats back what they've just said to her, but she says it
Hmm.
in the first person, like she pretends to be them,
Hmm.
and just explains it like,
Hmm.
I experienced this and I feel this, and then
Hmm.
that reflection just allows the client to see a new perspective.
Yes.
How often, like if you're talking to a friend over coffee, you have all this advice you could give. But then for yourself, it's hard to find that advice. So it's just like that
Yes,
reflection
exactly.
is just really helpful.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very important technique, a way of doing that, and why that works. I think it can be explained in the APHS field. The There would be something I would call parrot phrasing. A lot of times, coaches are taught to paraphrase, or in conversation, we're taught to paraphrase what somebody said. But when we paraphrase, we are interpreting what the person said, and it is external to the person, really, when they hear it back. And they can, give assent or disagree if it's the correct interpretation, but it's still an interpretation, it's still externalized. But there's what you're describing is really adjacent to, if not from, Brooks's clean language, and where what's happening is you're saying you're mirroring what the person is saying exactly. Okay, and it sounds like she might change it to first person, which is fine because it actually connects it a little bit nicer. I like that kind of little twist to it. But by saying it, the person is what is in their head and is bound up in everything that they can't see it from all the angles. When it comes back from the outside, they're now looking at it from another perspective. It's them. They connect with it because it's what they said, but it's they're now seeing it not through the eyes of what were their eyes at the time it was put there, but they're now seeing it from more mature eyes. They just had never examined it before. It was like hidden, but because it's parroted back, or because it's like put out and then it comes reflected back to them in a pure form, not an interpreted form. They're seeing their thought, and but they're seeing their thought with a more mature perspective. If it's 1 minute later, it's more mature, right? So,
Well,
uh,
yeah, I mean it just makes me think of like effective communication and asking for clarification because so often even very used words in our language have different meanings to each person.
all the time, always.
Right? Like for example, in my hypno training, we had an experiment where we took the word education and we all had to write down 10 words of what it meant to us and then read them to each other on the circle. And everyone had a very different meaning to a very popular word. And so to have effective communication, I feel it's very helpful to ask for clarification,
Oh, it is. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a valid
especially
part
when you
too.
notice that incoherence happening.
Yeah, exactly. And see, that's another angle. It is it's it's asking by asking for clarification, you're the person is now putting something out from their beliefs, and then when you parrot it back now, so the combination of clarification and parroting, it's a very hypnotic thing. It's a waking hypnosis, but it's a very hypnotic thing for people, and so that's another important angle to that is by asking for clarification. So what kind of education is an education like this? Right? If I want to go into my Brooks um,
Yes, because you don't need a long, like deepening, walking down a hill or anything, because when you're trying to ask for clarification and get them to explain what they mean, often they have to resort to metaphors
oh
because there's no other way to
yeah,
explain it.
absolutely. And even just by asking the question, it puts them in hypnosis from a transderivational viewpoint. They have to go inside to get the answer, because it's so they have to go inside. So they're already going into hypnosis, in my opinion.
Yes, a
I see it
helpful
very.
hypnosis, like from their perspective, like their subconscious is coming
Yes,
up with the answers. It's not us implanting
yes,
anything,
and then
which
they
is a
put
very
it out.
common misconception of hypnosis.
Exactly. And then they put it out, and then they get it, then it comes reflecting back, and then it's also like, whoa,
And all of a
whoa, I
sudden you're
never saw
you're
that
speaking the
before.
same language because you're talking in metaphor.
Exactly. And the metaphors are so important. We think, in my opinion, it's really a pre-verbal language. We're
Mm.
really thinking in pictures. They're so much more efficient than thinking in words. Because we can now work with associations in a much faster manner than a linear set of words that we have to parse. And we build up intuitive response of the pictures more than words. So words are important, and they're very helpful, and they're symbols themselves, but uh, they're a symbol that now requires a degree of parsing or interpretation. So it adds another layer of slowing down to the thoughts. But when a person can think in pictures, they can think very quickly because the associations come so quick. And that's really where they're thinking anyway. The words are, our conscious mind thinks that it's thinking in words, but it's actually not. The words are added layer later because we think they're important. But
Yeah.
the
And
metaphors is how
and
we operate completely, really.
yeah, and I feel like so much of our traumas are pre-verbal anyways,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's why that is so helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so bringing it over to APHS, really these experiences and these understandings and these interpretations are really everything. And if we're going to be helped ourselves, if we're going to help ourselves, if we're going to help other people, we really want to go to these frames, but not frames in the popular sense, like a cognitive frame where we just like we convince ourselves something different. Not at all. What we do is we have to have a different orientation and different perspective, and then all of a sudden the beliefs shift. And a lot of times it's from the metaphor, because the metaphor is simply, the metaphor is a symbol, but it's really more than a symbol. It's a collection of symbols all of which are relating to one another, and all of those symbols correspond to the reality within us, the way we're conceptualizing, the way we're relating to that problem. And when we can when that metaphor comes out, uh, we can then, we are now changing our relationship to it, and now all of a sudden we see it from a little different perspective. And when that metaphor shifts, the frame shifts, the belief shifts, it self-organizes. And this is really what APH is about. It's about humans as self-organizing systems that operate in terms of meaning and in terms of interpretations of things that are the meaning of it. And so those frames are they're very malleable. They're very strong and solid because they're kind of hidden from being monkeyed with by the conscious mind, thankfully. But on the other hand, they probably need that protection so that they don't get monkeyed with because they're so changeable. And that's the beauty of it, is we can really move forward in our life in the direction we want to go by bringing that coherence, and the coherence is in terms of those metaphors and the thinking, but they're all connected, because if we change the metaphor, we change the thinking. If we change the thinking, we change the metaphor too, but it's much slower. And and as you mentioned out, there are so many layers in the mind that's competing and trying to hide it, that it could take lifetimes to trickle through at that level. But
And at the same time, I find that in hypnosis, especially when I'm the client, how all of these things, how meaning organizes experience in a split second, how thousands of things can just be
boom,
reorganized.
boom.
And it doesn't take a lifetime of therapy sessions to
Not at
do
all.
that.
Not
Like
at all.
so much help can happen in a very small amount of time
Absolutely.
because of the subconscious mind.
Absolutely. It's self-organizing. We really are not organizing it. We're allowing it to self-organize. So we're
It's
working
just
in
so
harmony
much
with it.
more effective than
It is
the
entirely
conscious mind
effective.
therapy,
It
trying to be
absolutely.
like control
Well, here's the
things
thing.
like
Here's and it's not a bad reflection on therapy, but sometimes it's trying to do things it really should not do. And we really uh, the therapy is going to end up being effective if it's a self-organization. Otherwise, we're forcing ourselves to do something, and the self-organizing system of a human does not like being forced.
just like
And
the New Year's resolutions that
exactly,
kind of peter out after a few weeks.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so, so we are looking for a self-organization. The thing is, a lot of therapies in my experience, or in my studies, or in my opinion, are really based on searching for causes that are really totally unnecessary to know. We just have to know what the symptoms are so that we can say, well, I don't want this symptom. I want a different symptom, and then change a perspective. But a lot of them are so focused on drilling down into the problem and finding the problem, the root causes, and fixing that. And we don't need to do that at all. In fact, that makes it harder, and it makes it worse, because as you pointed out earlier, those parts don't want to be discovered a lot of times. They're there for a reason, to protect us, and they think that being discovered will not protect us. So
Yeah.
against the coherence of that part to be discovered. So it's going to throw up all kinds of smoke screens, and so you can spend your entire life trying to figure out why you're doing something, but the problem is, but the perspective is that you have to figure that out to fix it, and there's just a completely different reality out there.
Yeah, or in resistance to those parts, or in resistance, or like hating yourself in some way. Like there's obviously not coherence if there's that inner
No,
conflict
exactly,
there. And
absolutely.
and the like it was revolutionary to me to reframe my beliefs that all parts of me are doing the best they can from their level of
Yes,
understanding.
yes, exactly. And that's an important understanding about human systems, is that they're all doing the best they can, and then collectively we are doing the very best that we can, and then therefore by extension everybody is doing the very best they can. That's a very important concept. NLP as a field, has that as an assumption, which is really a good assumption to have.
And I mean, it would help the world so much if all therapists and literally all people would who are in relationship with each other would have that when they're relating to the other person, that they're doing the best they can.
Exactly. It would be very helpful.
it doesn't treat a seemingly opposite point of view or, as such a threat, you know.
Right, exactly. And here's the thing. I think that's a really a nice thought, and I think that's very accurate, and it would be a great goal. The thing is, it takes people lifetimes sometimes to figure all that out, and they've created all kinds of chaos, in the meantime. That's reverberating out into humankind, I guess, into the field we're in, into our reality because we're seeing it reflected back by now everybody's grumpy
Just
and
certain behaviors that are helpful and
yeah,
unhelpful. And
exactly,
in the
exactly.
therapy context, it's just more helpful to see the other person with that compassion. And if you can't, if
Yes.
there's something in your personal experience as a therapist that's holding you back from seeing them in that light, then they should find a different
Yes,
therapist.
yes, exactly. And APHS would say that we don't have to see the person in a bad light. But if we see the person in a bad light, well, then that's an indication of something going on inside, and we can then begin to look at what that's coming from, and we can then change our orientation. So APHS, without being a system or a framework, it can actually allow people who want to do that a way to even do it more. But they would be interpreting it in their way and then using, how we change and how we orient it to our world and the interpretations of it and how we change those things and we can take it in that direction. But I think the thing, everybody's going to be developing in different ways at different levels, and so we're really going to always have this. I think theoretically we could probably say that there could be a point where everybody does operate from that level. I mean that's conceivable, probably not realistically, but theoretically it's conceivable. But I wonder what we get from having it not that way. I wonder how we benefit from having it like this. And knowing it can get better, and knowing it probably is getting better. I mean, certainly, probably, centuries ago it wasn't even as good as this, but in other ways, centuries ago it was probably better in other things. So I wonder what will be gain and benefit from it being like this?
Well, I feel like we would evolve when we can see that the world is yin yang and that there are these polarities that exist. And I like to sometimes view the world through um, the elements, like how fire and air work together.
Hmm.
And when they're not in balance or incoherent, it can be like a forest fire or, the frozen tundra, or there could be a nice balanced campfire,
There you go.
right?
Exactly.
Or
Well,
like even like earth and water, how
yeah.
how earth, has like the boundary for the water,
Hmm.
and how out of balance that could be flooding or,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. And so what if we have coherence, we probably have to have incoherence for a polarity. And so we need incoherence almost, don't we?
Yeah.
But
Well,
but
like
but
it shows what it's not. Like the whole
exactly.
our
And
whole
that's
discussion
really kind
here.
of
Yeah.
important based on this paper. It's very important to know what something is not to be able to understand what something actually is.
Because it has like a boundary, like
Yeah,
the land and the ocean, right? It
exactly.
shows what is the land and what's the ocean.
Exactly. So incoherence is not a bad thing either, I don't think. And I don't think it's necessarily unhelpful because it'll allow some people a chance to understand what coherence is. But there also probably is an evolution. You'll use that word. There's probably is also an evolution where, the polarities will be different. There will still be
Yeah, just like opposites attract, or when you have
exactly,
that
exactly.
tension, that is the space where creativity and creation
Yes,
happens.
yes. And so when there's incoherence, it's probably a good thing for us. In fact, my timeline surfing framework, the incoherence is the wave that we ride on, and it lifts us and it carries us to where we want to go.
Ooh, I
So,
love that metaphor,
so
and like how the resistance is the path.
the resistance is yes, but not in a stoic sense, which I admire in itself, but in the sense that It is what empowers it and drives it and gives it context and shapes it into a physical reality. Because before it meets that resistance outside, it's already in a conceptually good, workable thing inside. But when we bring it to create it into the world, now it's that tension, now it's that resistance, now it's that incoherence. Now, those points of incoherence creates tension and resistance. But that's what a surfer is riding on. It's the surfer is riding on that tension. Otherwise, they'd be sink, right? So they're
Well, that's
riding
what
that
it
tension.
creates, that feeling of aliveness.
Yes, exactly. So incoherence is not a bad thing. I just would not want to live like that. But I don't mind living in an incoherent world. And in fact, because I can't know everything, it always will be incoherent because I will not always understand everything around me, right?
Yes, and it's like more of a flexible
Yes.
perspective than a
Well,
fixed.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's so important, Chantel. I really appreciate how you really tune into that because I think that's so important because if we have to control life, and I think as kids, at first we're not because we don't think we have, then we kind of have to, feel like we have to, and and different people have different layers of that or levels of that, but there's kind of that tendency to want to control things. And then if we have experiences in our life where we're not in control, or where control was imposed on us and we didn't like that, then we can develop where we have the frame is we need to control, and that creates a lot of tension in our own lives, and we don't really end up controlling much anyway. But if we can not control, we have a lot of freedom by not trying to control, and when we have that freedom, we can be free to be what we want, and we can live with those tensions because they don't threaten us. They can't control us, but they are in the environment out there. We're trying to make our way through that environment, but we can relate to them different than as threats. We can relate to them as tensions, and not tensions that are bad tension, but good tension that gives that framework and that flavor and that structure that's going to hold up what we're doing.
hmm I'm not sure why I'm seeing this picture right now. Maybe you could bring some light to it,
Sure.
but I'm seeing like a playground at school, and one playground has a fence around it, and the kids are playing everywhere on the yard and right up to the fence, and they feel safe. And another playground has no fence around it, and so the kids are all huddled very much in the center, feeling very uncertain about where the line is.
Yeah,
How does that relate?
that's a good metaphor. uh, because when those fences are artificial barriers, but they're doing an important thing. And we may feel like not having fences is healthy and good, but really, when we are finite in our understandings and our understandings and our knowledge, and when we go into a finite space and we can see the boundaries, we feel very secure as humans. And that doesn't mean that we can't go outside the fence. We can. It doesn't mean that we can't, be explorers and live outside the fence. That we can. But the thing is, for the most part, and at certain times in our lives, we need that fence because it explains the boundaries within which we are safe and which we can make sense of the world more. And that even and that sense of the world is only a model, and every model is only a working model. They're never accurate. So the fact that it's a limited fenced-in playground world makes no difference. The people within it, the children within it, they are able to understand the world. They're able to understand the boundaries. They are able to then explore all the boundaries. And then when they grow up, they can understand they can go outside those boundaries, but there's going to be outside boundaries from that. And the boundaries are always going to be our perceptions, right? There's always going to be more reality out there than what we can perceive. And so we can always be running up against boundaries. So the boundary works to contain our reality, but it doesn't constrain it where we can't go outside of it. But a lot of people think we can't. That's a whole nother story. But the boundaries give a person safety to explore that entire world, and when they and get good at who they are in that world, and then once they get that strength, they can operate outside of those fences, but the fences serve a beautiful purpose of constraining, the person so they can learn within a limited world important skills that could translate outside that world as well. Does that answer your question? Or it was pretty cool
Yes,
metaphor.
it also opened up hundreds of tabs. I have to only pick just one.
I know my brain
Um,
is it's my brain crashes all the time from too many tabs open.
yes. So I was thinking about like personalizing this like to my experience. I grew up in a very strict environment, and then I landed up raising my kids in a very freedom and like all the flexibility and pretty much no fence. And then I was surprised at the anxiety felt as they're like sort of crouched in the center because there was no boundary there. And
Right.
it puzzled me for a long time, but I'm beginning to understand it more. Um, and also, I was another one of the tabs I was thinking about was myself as a chameleon. I feel like when I'm in my own energy by myself, then I know what I want. But when anytime I'm in the energy of someone else, like interacting with someone else, I just become their color and talk about what they want to, and do what they
Mm,
want to do. And I feel like it's imbalanced. There's some incoherence there. I would like to have more balance in my life so that when I'm
sure.
with another person, I can still have some of my color too and not
Sure.
completely
Well,
turn
of
into their
course.
color. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course, and 100%. We're
Yeah.
supposed to be that way.
And
It's
so like
supposed to
this
in the
whole
sense
exploration of like
exactly.
what
Yeah.
this is and what it isn't and
Yeah.
the boundary and talking about all of this is helping my subconscious like
Yes.
evolve in
You're
in that
shifting some frames there,
exploration.
right?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, and frankly, what you described there in terms of that it doesn't make sense. Oh, it makes complete sense. That given what you just said, I don't really know the details, but given what you just said, you were in a controlling environment, and now you find that you become a chameleon when you're in the environment. Well, you had to be that way to survive a controlling environment. I don't know the details, but
But it
just
just
that
makes sense. You don't
context.
need the details.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Just the context says you probably had to survive by becoming a chameleon because you were in a restrictive environment. So that is completely reasonable to adjust to that, to do that. So really, what's imbalanced is not that, but what's really imbalanced is that that is not required now.
Hmm.
And so really you may be looking more for where the boundaries are now and what's the fence. And you don't want to have no fence necessarily, but you need a broader fence that allows you to be you in even in other people's energy. So in other words, have your own energy, hold your own frame and keep your own space, even while other
Know my
people
own
allowing
color.
others.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a skill, and I think you probably have already well developed it. In fact, anytime anybody thinks of a skill that they want, they probably have already that's already on the road of doing that. So you already are on the way of doing that. I'm quite confident, just simply the way you said it. But and the fact that you identified that there are frame shifts going on means that they're actually shifting deeper. You were voicing something you felt, so you're already shifting that way, and
Yeah, I
really.
found that the energy of preference has been very helpful to navigate it because it is a more flexible field.
And the field doesn't, and the beautiful thing is the field doesn't make the reality of it. The field
Yeah.
simply describes what's already there.
Yeah, I guess it's more of a lens that
It's a
that
lens. It's
preference is
perfect
is a
word.
lens that is helpful to not change color. You know.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think to APHS, that's what it is. It's a lens that helps a person orient themselves so they can navigate. It doesn't say where they should navigate. It doesn't say how they should interpret what they're oriented to. It just
Yeah,
gives
because you
them,
can't you can't come up with every scenario and
no, and
how,
we don't
that's why
have
all these
to.
rules are.
We don't have to because humans will
Yeah.
self-organize in the optimal way.
Yeah.
They won't think it's optimal because it will probably usually be not too much fun. But the fact is there is a logic to it, not a conscious logic, but there's reasons for us
Like
to
a
be the
sort
way
of
we are.
golden rule thing. Um, is helpful in a way, but I can also see how it could be misconstrued
Oh
sometimes
yeah. Oh, it's
because,
used
you
sparingly
know,
sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, speaking of that golden rule, it kind of connected with something you said earlier. It's nice, have the freedom, to not choose. But then the golden rule is we have to give other people the freedom to see it their way, whether it's coherent or incoherent. And I know you know that, but I'm just bringing that out as an important point that the freedom is freedom to not have to control everybody else either, which goes to something else we said. It's all a part of a fabric, and we're just like
Yeah,
kind of pulling
because
threads, right?
the golden rule is like do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But what if they wouldn't want to be treated like that? Their perceptions are completely different and their worldview
That's
is
their
completely
business.
different. Yeah. And
That's
so
they can do it the way they want to do it. I'm doing it my
yeah.
way,
Yeah. It's
right?
just like,
Yeah,
yeah.
we get in there and we don't have to be chameleons, but it's not bad to be a chameleon either because it does help to be able to fit in, to be able to work with other people, and we are designed to work with other people, and that's an important part of coherence. But I think where you're really saying is we don't want to become somebody else. We want to be ourselves in that whole milieu of different opinions, right?
Yeah, well, I just think also it's important for empaths to have that personal responsibility for
Mm,
themselves, but also for other people and not to take their stuff on as their own. I feel
yes.
like it takes away that personal responsibility for others, or it makes them not be able to progress on their evolution because the empaths are just holding all their stuff for them. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. It does. That's an important realization for an empath. Absolutely. And really, when you look at it, there really is no requirement that they be responsible for all that. And that's just a frame they have, and it's a frame that they needed to survive somewhere, some way. And it doesn't mean they actually needed it. They interpreted that they needed it at a other than conscious
Mm-hmm.
level. And so, for them, it is very freeing. Absolutely.
Yeah, so back to the paper about what it is not. How would you sum it up? Your
I would sum it up that APHS is a field and that it's not a framework or it's not a method, and that it simply describes what's there, and it doesn't even claim that it's right. It's just based on observations and it's open to being changed. But as a frame, it gives helpful orientation. And then with that orientation, it allows that orientation is what brings the freedom to move because you are now oriented to where you are and you also see what's other places and you can move within that. So APHS is really upstream of all kinds of frameworks and applications and methods. And that could be disconcerting to people because usually they're looking for those things, but they can have those things, but those are applications. The field itself is not enough to do anything. The field just allows you to see what's there. And then what you do with it is just depends on the person. I don't know if that's really a summary as much as, but
No, I think it's a good summary.
okay.
I think it provides people with the agency that they might not know that they want and the
Yes.
flexibility and choice that they didn't know was available to them before.
Yes, 100% Chantel. Well said. That's really what the goal of APH is. It's not to give a method or a framework, a belief system. It's not to define how things are in an ultimate sense. It's a model. And in fact, the fourth book, the fourth and fifth in the paper in the first book, they keep flipping around in my mind. One is theory of mind. The other one is how metaphors and truth and how we don't really need the truth to really be
Oh,
able to
I'm looking
function in
forward
life.
to that one.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one. Those are good ones.
Yeah.
I love them all,
Well, of course. They're your babies.
but they're very coherent with me. But and I think that's the value of this conversation is I want to see if it's actually coherent with other people, and so
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
appreciate the conversation today, Chantel. Any
Yeah,
last
likewise.
thoughts before we close up?
No, I think that we covered a lot.
We did. It's a big world, and we actually covered the whole world, but we don't really know how. We just know the little piece we've talked about today. So pretty cool, huh?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Chantel, I'm looking forward to perhaps some future conversations and uh, really wish you all the best in your life and in your work. And just I'm very excited to hear about that shift and that move away from towards being who you are and holding your frame, well, you're allowing others to have their frame. I think that's a powerful place in life to be. So I'm really excited for you on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Chantelle, any last words before we close?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chantelle. And thank you for listening today. You're listening to What's Actually Happening, the founding papers of Applied Philosophy of Human Systems. Those papers are available at aphsfield.com, and they include everything we discussed today and much more. I look forward to continuing the conversation with you next week. Until then, see what you notice.